This episode of the ClearOut was recorded on the 9th of April 2024 at home in Wicklow, and it is an episode that started with sun, went to rain and came back to sun. And the topic of conversation between me and you is intentionality, clarity, self-care, compassion, and the belief in the possibility of positive change. And I end the episode with some thoughts on the current Netflix series Ripley, the latest adaptation of Patricia Highsmith's character Tom Ripley. So, yeah, and as I say in the episode, in a way, this is probably the episode I should have done or could have done last week for the big 150, but I didn't because I just didn't have the head on. And this week is more maybe what I wanted to do. Okay, so I hope you enjoy what you hear. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear and you're listening to the ClearOut. You're very welcome. How does this moment find you? What are you up to? Where are you at? How do you feel? Is that a good question? Is that a threatening question? Is that intrusive? How do you feel? It's a bit therapeutic, isn't it? It's a bit of a therapy type question. So, tell me, how does this make you feel? Anyway, how do you feel? Now, is that emphasis on the how? How do you feel? I feel with my... Complete that sentence. I feel with my eyebrows. I meet the world with my eyebrows. They're like little sensors. They're very much like insect feelers, feeling what's out there, feeling the vibrations, feeling the moisture in the moment. How do you feel? That isn't the question, is it? It's not really a question of mode or method, but a question of things felt, things experienced, things that reach us in places that often surprise us. Isn't that the realm of feelings? Isn't it how other people trigger things in us? And I'm not using trigger in the contemporary use of trigger, as in, cause me to have a traumatic callback or a traumatic explosion in the moment, but how other people stimulate, cause us to respond, to react, maybe in ways that we're not fully in control of. I mean, surely that's the area of connection. That's the area, if it's positive, and I'm choosing to think it is positive. That is an area of connection, friendship, love, romance, bond, deep connection. And isn't that a lovely thing when you can experience that with someone? I look out my window and the sun was there. It appears to have disappeared behind some clouds. Maybe there's more rain coming because we haven't had enough rain yet this year in Ireland. We're dying for rain. We're thirsty for more. That is not true. We have been positively drowned all winter and now well into spring. Rain, way too much of it. I'm looking at my grass. I see 4 daisies peeping out of the grass, and they've got little bits of pink in them. They're really lovely. I do love my daisies. And really what I'm seeing is I just want to get that lawn. I want to get the lawnmower out there and cut them down. All that grass on the daisies. I want to go, get out of here. But I think the ground is still too bloody wet. Oh, God, it's the pits. Anyway, I shouldn't be giving out because actually there was some beautiful blue sky earlier. It's quite cold out today. Okay, the weather report, that's done. No more. No more mention of the weather. So, what's happening today? What's happening in today's episode? Well, I'll tell you. Last week's episode, the episode that I dedicated to the career of Tom Cruise, there is the bloody rain. God damn it. Last week's episode, the Tom Cruise episode, which I did for episode 150, I wasn't pleased with that episode. I thought it was below par and it frustrated me, but I had a window. I was exhausted when I recorded it. I could barely keep a thought in my head, and it was, though, the only real genuine window, and I had to take it. But I was disappointed. There were lots of things I didn't mention that I could have, and I'm not going to apologise for it. Okay, I'm not going to apologise because that goes against part of the ethos of the ClearOut, which is to sit, to record, to produce, and to publish or to issue, whichever you prefer, without regret. And that's the game I play. But I was disappointed with last week's episode. I was like, oh man, really? Is that the best I could have done? It definitely wasn't, but it was the best I could have done in that moment. And maybe today's episode is going to be a bit more like what I probably should have done last week, which was more around that idea of looking at the milestone of 150 episodes and reflecting on what this continues to be here on the ClearOut. And yeah, I've just been thinking about, this morning I found myself thinking about the idea of clarity and reflecting also on the nominative determinism of my name being clear, and the strong instinct I have, the strong desire that I have, the leaning I have for clarity, in all aspects of my life. And it's a funny thing, particularly if you have creative impulses, if you have a desire to have key parts of your life tethered to creativity, tethered to being productive, tethered to making things, tethered to the expression of something, then I think it can be very tempting to want to be what? I don't know. I mean, this illustrates for me immediately how this isn't my natural mode. But I think it can be tempting to want to be more, to want to be shinier, to want to be more brilliant, to want to be more exceptional. And in the effort to achieve that state, to overdo things, or to have an instinct that you want to throw more at the canvas. And I feel that less is better. But the thing is, when you do less, you're much more easily seen and much more easily exposed. And less can be really very little and maybe not enough. And that's the risk. And it's also the the challenge, and maybe a certain amount of the desire for simplicity, clarity, something being stripped back. I view that as a desire to have something very powerful and very pure, something that's irreducible and undeniable, elemental. That's the aspiration, and when that can be achieved and hopefully incorporated into something of, creative value, of artistic value, of communicative value, of aesthetic value, I think that's a real achievement. Now, the fear is, of course, that you create something that's stripped back and reduced and elemental and all those things in your opinion, but then it ends up being a bit empty or a bit thin, or not really carrying the import with which you hoped to imbue it. But that's the game. I mean, that's the risk one runs. And if I think about what I've done here, if I think about what I've done here in this space, by which I mean the podcast space, as well as the literal space in #blessed where I live. The sun is back out and it's absolutely gorgeous. What the hell is up with this weather in this country at this moment? Just accept it. Just accept it. That's the deal. That's the only response that will not cause aggravation. But yeah, if I think about what I've done here on the podcast, you could certainly argue that it hasn't been simple. On one level, you could argue it's been wordy and over elaborate and over explained and overly verbal. But what are you going to do? I mean, it's, that's the mode. But what I would hope is, if you chose to listen to all 150 and now 151 episodes, that there would be a through line that is satisfying, and a through line that makes sense, a through line that is consistent in terms of the messaging, in terms of the voice, and of course, it is like the consistent element is me coming to the mic once a week and bringing however I am. And that's not, I haven't misspoken. That's not a slip. Bringing however I am, like whatever state I'm in, that comes to the mic. And I think I've been pretty honest in terms of what I've brought. And I believe there's value in that. And that's why I still come back, even though I occasionally put out an episode and go, oh man, really? Is that it? Is that really it? You're going to ask someone to spend a bloody hour listening to that? Yep, that is 100% what's going on. Anyway, it's an interesting thing, I think, to try and nail intention. So this is a semi-philosophical question what is your intention? What are you trying to do? What is anyone trying to do? And intention doesn't have to be particularly philosophical. It doesn't have to be loaded with meaning. Intention can simply be the achievement of a particular task, trying to get from point A to point B, trying to get from Monday to Friday, trying to negotiate illness, trying to negotiate bereavement, trying to negotiate uncertainty. That can be the intention. And I think probably if you dig into that a little bit, everyone on an instinctive level is operating with a clear intention. Now, I need to qualify that. That doesn't mean everyone knows. It doesn't mean everyone knows, this is what I am trying to do. This is what I want to do. This is what I must do. This is what I am doing. It's not that. I don't mean that. For some people, that is the case. Some people are very clear. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to get. This is what I'm trying to achieve. And that can be a moment-to-moment thing. That can be a 10-year plan. I'm sure ambitious people, that's such a generic term. It's so nondescript in its way. But maybe people who aspire to really achieve at the highest level in their chosen areas, whatever that may be, I'm sure their intentionality, their sense of intention is really clear to them. But I think, a lot of us are acting very intentionally, even if we don't know it. So we might not be able to articulate, oh, this is why I'm doing that. This is why that is my pattern. I mean, there's an intention in that. Like, why am I avoiding that situation? Why do I not do that? Why do I not make that choice? That's actually intentional. Because there's an intentionality in the things we turn away from. There's an intentionality in what we instinctively move away from or are repelled by or repulsed by on an instinctive level. It's my intention to move away from that flame. It's my intention to move away from that smell. And yeah, sure, that can be literal, but that can be metaphorical. We're taking ourselves away from the things that don't appeal to us and don't suit us. And when we resist that, when we resist the instinct, when we resist the deep down knowledge, the deep down intention, when we resist it and move against it, I think that creates a huge amount of stress, a huge amount of inner conflict that we can't always articulate. And I think it takes work. It takes real work to look at that and to go, okay, that's what's going on. That's why this is so distressing, or this is why it gets my back up so quickly. Because my intention is not to move in that direction at all, but to move in a completely different direction. And when I think of that and come back to this idea of clarity, and the name of the podcast, the ClearOut, the name of the website, I'm not sure if the website's live. It's the website, the revamped website is, if it's not live, it's imminent. I haven't checked in the last few days, but Daniel, my friend Daniel, is working on it, and we're just going to put in some final touches to it. I will let you know. But this idea of the kind of the mission statement of the website, which was, the original blog, which was launched in 2013, called the ClearOut, and the idea of decluttering, clarifying, connecting. That really hasn't changed. That intention to achieve clarity as a means to achieving connection. And, connection, of course, can be with other people, but connection can also be with this idea of, where do I want to be? Where am I trying to get to? Am I going to make my connection? If you want to take the train travel, the travel idea and use that as a metaphor, I want to make my connection. So really what we're looking for is clear paths. Clear the way. Get the obstacles out of the way so you can move stress-free towards your objective, towards your destination. And that can make that, I think that can make very obvious sense if you're someone who is moving in a very linear way and thinking, I'm here now and I want to get there. And when I get there, I want to get to that point further than there. And when I get further than there, I want to go beyond that point, and so on. And it's a continual sort of advancement or a continual progression. And of course, if you apply that to education, or if you apply that to career, maybe you can apply that to family, making a family. I want one child, and then I want 2 children, and then I want 4 children. Whatever it might be, it can be definitely, it can be accumulative, or it can be ticking off stages of development or evolution or improvement or whatever. And I think that, that can make a lot of sense. And having a singularity of purpose makes that very easy in a way to go, yeah, I know exactly what I want to do. But of course, your clarity of vision, your clarity of intention, to go back to the idea of intentionality, can be very different to that. It can be like, for me, and you'll know this if you've listened to the podcast, one of my main intentions is to be here now. So it's very existential in a way. It's very much about being in the moment. There is, of course, a Zen aspect to that. There is a mindfulness to that. It can be very philosophical. And I suppose I view it in terms of trying to not get caught up in things that feel destructive to my sense of peace and wellness and, tranquility. If you can tolerate that kind of a word. And it's about trying to not get hysterical and not get freaked out and terrified and massively agitated or destabilized by the pressures of life, and to try and walk a line where that doesn't sort of devolve, or no, I can't think of the word I want, but that it doesn't sort of deteriorate into a sort of a stasis or an apathy or a disengagement, because I think it's easy to it's easy to suspect or project onto that intention an opting out or an unreality, a kind of a selfish detachment. And yeah, I don't value that. I think there has to be engagement, because I think it's unnatural not to engage. And that idea of, what's natural, that's definitely part of how I view things and how I view the world and how I view trying to live and stay well. And how I view how I draw a kind of correlation between naturalness and rightness, in the sense of, not right as in being correct, or, my rightness as opposed to someone else's wrongness. I mean, rightness as natural order. So if you saw a tree upside down, fully erect, but upside down with the roots in the air and the branches and leaves planted in the earth, you go, that's not right. Or a fish moving through the air, that hasn't been thrown by somebody at somebody. What's that? Give me back my salmon. No, that's not right. That's what I mean. So some things are natural, and I think it's natural to engage. But engagement, and engage with life, engage with other people, engage with the challenges of life. But that takes energy. And I think that's where many of us become unstuck, because our energy gets depleted, and that's like emotional energy, that's mental energy, physical energy. Those things can be so compromised by many different things. So many different things. As I've shared in a couple of episodes since Christmas, it's only April. So just in the last 3 months, I've definitely had some serious energy depletion, emotional energy, mental energy. I've been absolutely pummeled by, a couple of very bad bouts of depression, anger, a real sort of mental collapse, a collapse of my normal armory, a collapse of my normal structures internally that keep me well. Now, externally, I have still been doing fine and being as functional as I normally am. Now, it's not for me to put a place of value on that objectively, but I know, in terms of my own patterns and routines and habits, I've maintained all of them. And there have just been times over the last few months where they haven't been enough. But you could also argue that if I wasn't doing those things, I would have been much, much worse. So I'm recognizing in myself at the moment, a certain depletion and a certain compromised state that is bringing challenges that I don't especially welcome. Sorry about the noise there. I'm taking off my cardigan. There's nothing quite as sexy as an old cardigan on a middle-aged man. I'm removing my cardigan. I remember when I was in acting school in England back in the mid-90s, we were doing a performance of A Christmas Carol, and there were some child actors from Exeter who were known to the acting school where I trained, and they were being used. They were performing in the play. So we had a little tiny Tim, and I can't remember. No, it must have been when we were rehearsing. We had our standard uniform, which was a black sweatshirt and black tracksuit pants and jazz shoes. For all that jazz. But I had a cardigan on as well, and this little young fella was very amused by me and my cardigan. And one of my classmates was like, "Yeah, that's Grandpa Joe." So the kid, that's how he referred to me thereafter, as Grandpa Joe. So I had a penchant for cardigans. This is going back many years. Although I feel like for quite a few years I wasn't wearing them at all, but my wife got me one last year, and it's become a firm favourite. Anyway, it's got those big kind of toggle buttons, so that's what was clacking. That's what was taking it off. Always hot moments here on the ClearOut. I hope that wasn't too intimate for you. So in any case, yeah. So the challenges of engagement, the challenges of trying to step up and be present, they're ongoing. They're ongoing. Like, and maybe as we get older, it gets more difficult. But I don't know. I mean, I feel I just never feel I can speak for anyone other than myself, and like I just see, part of getting older, I hope that there's a greater opportunity for more clarity and more calmness, and less of the aforementioned hysteria. And more faith that things are survivable. Because as we age, there's a sense of, I don't know, what is the sense? Is the sense, how much worse can it get? Is the sense is it the sense that everything has been seen, everything has been done, everything has been experienced? The only way is down? Is that? So there's kind of a resignation. I was talking to one of my cousins about this recently, and like she was saying, there's just a feeling of kind of who cares? And I think there's a great kind of freedom that comes with that. As long as you still, this is where my idealism comes in, as long as you still care for yourself, like in a healthy way. It's not about being self-absorbed, but to treat yourself with care is really important. It's more than important. It's vital. It's essential to handle yourself with care, to mind yourself, because there's no guarantee anybody else will, and that's the sort of that's the road to sort of abdication of self, to abandoning oneself. And I've spoken about this in the context of depression, in the context of those very low periods I sometimes experience and have, as I say, I've had a couple of bad episodes this year, and it is like that's a huge part of how I experience myself in those moments, and it is a kind of a walking away. And and sometimes worse. It's not enough to walk away. I need to put the boot in as well, because of the and it's not every time, but sometimes there's an accompanying anger, which I'm not always totally sure what to attribute the anger to. If it's frustration at my own sense of failure, If it's frustration at my own sense of helplessness in that moment, a certain futility, shaking my fist at the sky, and that area of conflict with what I want, how I want things to be versus how they are, and then a sense of, well, they're not going to change. No matter how upset I am, things aren't going to change. And maybe that's what upsets me and angers me, because generally speaking, I'm a big believer in change. I'm a big believer in the idea that there's always the possibility of change for the better. I don't go around celebrating the idea of changing for the worse. That doesn't make my heart sing. That doesn't fill me with joy. I just think, I don't know. I just think there's, as much as humans, there seems to be an endless kind of depthless capacity in humanity to be absolutely terrible to one another, to be horrible, to be brutal, to be full of hate, to be full of fear, full of spite, to act out in the most destructive ways imaginable. I was just reading an article on The Guardian earlier this morning about an Azerbaijani woman, a photographer, who was living in Egypt and was brutally assaulted by a taxi driver one night. He didn't sexually assault her, but he beat her up really badly. And she was describing that experience and, the sense of shame that came with it, and how she took a photograph of herself, her bloodied, beaten, scarred face, and reluctantly shared it on social media, and the responses it got, and then being afraid to tell her daughter, and then how it informed her understanding of other victims of sort of conflict violence, and women, female victims of violence of war, female victims of rape as a weapon of war. That sort of stuff. It just, nothing. Do you ever feel like nothing will ever surprise you? Like nothing surprises you about the terrible things that people do to other people. But it doesn't mean you're blasé about them. I understand from a few different sources that the attacks in Israel in October that triggered the current conflict, if you want to describe that specifically as that triggered this particular expression of the conflict, but those October 7th attacks apparently were absolutely horrific. But then what's been going on in Gaza since then has been horrific. And where do you let that sit in you with a level of hope or faith that things can be better? Where does that horror sit in you so you can kind of square it away and go, I don't know. It's fine to be sitting here in Ireland, safely removed from that. But, I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that. I tend not to let that stuff in. I feel like I'm aware of it, but I don't seek it out. I don't seek out the images. I don't seek out the footage, because I question the value of doing that. I questioned the value of, when ISIS were beheading journalists and putting that footage online, I never sought out those images. I just don't think that does anything for us. I don't think it I don't know. I mean, I just don't. I don't value it. I don't think it deepens my understanding of anything. I think it's just something that's horrific. And if you go back to what I was saying earlier, the idea of naturalness, I don't believe it's natural for us to hack each other to pieces or chop heads off. I don't think it's natural for men to be so dehumanized that they blithely break into people's homes and rape women. I don't think that's natural. I think something's been lost. Something in the humanity of those perpetrators has been lost. Something in the lack of care for themselves indicates, profound trauma in them. It's absolutely, it's horrible. And it devalues everything. And that type of violence can make everything just seem kind of meaningless, because it's just so base and kind of atavistic. And I don't know. Like, isn't the response to lean further into humanity, into compassion, into tolerance, into forgiveness, into love? I just think that's ultimately where people are renewed. They are renewed in the breath of love. They're renewed in the gaze of forgiveness. They're renewed in the gaze of acceptance and non-judgment. But of course, when we talk about like trauma, and that type of trauma from extreme violence and brutality, there has to be healing. There has to be a place to heal. There has to be a place to own the wounds. There has to be a place to own the trauma. And there has to be a place for the purging of that pain, the purging of that grief. And I think sometimes in the world there's a terrible impatience to move on from grief. There's a terrible impatience to kind of rush people to closure. And again, not natural. That is not a natural way to be. I think grief takes time. Recovering from trauma takes time. It has to be organic. There has to be patience. And it's not a clean A to B journey. Not by a long shot. It's very layered. It's very complex. And it just requires, greater understanding and care being extended all round. And so to come back to the start of that, which was, people's capacity to change for the better, I think you'll find evidence throughout history where, just because I was talking about conflict, I think there's evidence where you find, men who committed terrible atrocities and acts of warfare against each other. They age out of it. They evolve out of it and no longer recognize their younger selves. And they arrive at a place of shared grief and sadness and loss and forgiveness. I think, am I mistaken? I believe that's out there. Veterans of conflict, veterans of war, who who find a type of acceptance later in life. I mean, not everyone, of course, and of course, post-traumatic stress disorder is largely connected to, the idea of, largely connected to, the lived experience of soldiers, of men and women in conflict situations. Of course, it doesn't just happen in war zones. PTSD can be, can occur for many other reasons far away from the fields of battle. But not every field of battle is a literal war zone carried out by soldiers, our military personnel. A field of battle can happen internally. It can happen to anyone for all kinds of reasons. But I return to my belief that there's always a chance. There's always a chance to change for the better. And I think if we are successful in extending ourselves a level of care, I think our sense of our sensitivity to those chances, or that one chance, I think it's there. And I think if we're extending ourselves the type of care I'm thinking of, not only is the sensitivity to the chance, the sensitivity to the possibility of change, not only is it there, but we also have, sufficient compassion for ourselves that will give us permission to act. And this is a really important thing, to not wait for somebody else's permission, to not wait for somebody else's approval, but to give ourselves permission to do what we believe is best for us. I recognize that might be easier said than done, but this is all rooted in a very strong concept of personal responsibility. It's all rooted in a belief in the ability to care for oneself, in a really, healthful way. This isn't about being self-absorbed or narcissistic or prioritizing oneself above all others. Not at all. But I actually think it's irresponsible to not look after yourself. I think it's just, I think it's necessary. And it just has to be part of the picture. It has to be part of the equation, no matter what's going on in your life. You have to find that space, that moment, something that goes, this is what I need. This is my restorative ritual. This is my restorative routine. This is what I do for me. That's my as my wife, what's it my wife call it? Dara's good life. She has a really withering, and believe me, she's not saying that with a lot of amusement or warmth. When she sees me disappearing out the door to take myself for a swim, or when she sees me in the back field doing qigong or tai chi or whatever it might be, she's like, oh yeah, there he is living his good life. It's a bit unfair, I think, to be honest with you, but I can see the funny side. Anyway, just to sort of end today's episode, and speaking of clarity, and this may feel strange, but have you been watching Ripley Everyone seems to be talking about Ripley, the series on Netflix starring Andrew Scott, the Irish actor, in the title role of Ripley, also with Johnny Flynn and Dakota Fanning, and is it Elliot Sumner, Sting's daughter, now son? I'm not sure. There must be. I think there's a trans story there that I have to educate myself about or get up to speed about. But I've only watched the first 2 or 3 episodes, and it's excellent. And Andrew Scott is excellent, and it is shot in the most beautiful black and white photography by Robert Elswit, who, he's a very, very experienced photographer. And the closest comparison in terms of the cinematography would be George Clooney's Good Night and Good Luck from, how long ago is that? Is that 20 years old now? It's hard, maybe, is it? Because that was also shot in black and white by the same cinematographer. He also did the first 4 or 5 of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, including There Will Be Blood and Magnolia and Inherent Vice. And the series is directed by Steve Zalian, who is probably known mostly as a screenwriter. He did the screenplay for Moneyball, one of my favourite movies. He did the adaptation, the screenplay for Schindler's List. He's done lots and lots of different things. He also wrote and directed the adaptation HBO series The Night Of from about 8 years ago, which I think was adapted from an English show of the same name, or maybe it didn't have the same name. That had Riz Ahmed in it. A very edgy, very tense drama about a young man who goes home with a girl after a night out. Oh no, wait, was he her taxi driver? Anyway, he wakes up and she's been stabbed to death, and he is accused. And he's like, I did not do this thing. And so it's a very edgy, tense, kind of horrifying prison drama and then courtroom drama. John Turturro is brilliant in that show as kind of a shambolic defense lawyer. But that was Steve Zalian's work as well. In any case, this Ripley, I mean, inevitably it's going to be compared to Anthony Minghella's The Talented Mr. Ripley, which I think was 1999? I rewatched that last year. God, that movie stands up so well. It's so good. Such amazing depth in that cast of actors. Jude Law, Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, Kate Blanchett, Philip Seymour Hoffman, of course. It really is great, and so vibrant and so full of sunshine and life and colour, and confidence and swagger. But a really, a great movie, great entertainment, and much darker than you may remember. You may just remember, as I did, it's just full of those young, talented, beautiful actors, and it was fun. But when I watched it last year, I was like, oh no, this is really, it's like the darkness in it is very, very, very powerful. But this adaptation, based on the same story, is really good. It's much more spare, much cleaner, much less busy, and really interestingly cast, with Johnny Flynn in what was the Jude Law part, with Dakota Fanning in what was the Gwyneth Paltrow part, and just really nice different interpretations of those characters. But of course it all hinges on Andrew Scott, and he is just great. He's just doing some such lovely acting. He's just so slippery and elusive, and just very kind of sensually sort of sinister. He does some great face acting. Just these very subtle changes on his face that can communicate so much. And it's a very, and this is not to be insulting at all, but it's a very cute, clever performance. Like, there's a real intelligence in the performance. Now, you know how much I hate cute acting and cute actors who want to be loved by the screen and loved by the fans, the moviegoers. That this is not that iteration of cute. I mean, this is just a very accomplished performance. But yeah, the cinematography is gorgeous. Now, there are times when I was looking at it last night and I was going, okay, I can see this in colour, like the brilliance and the clarity of the image. I can see this as really crystal clear digital photography. But nonetheless, it is in absolute, it's just pristine black and white images. And there's something really calming about that. And I remember when I used to take a lot of photographs, quite a few years ago now, and I was very fond of black and white, film photography. And there's just something about a good black and white image. There's a clarity and a cleanness to the lines, and that's very much the case in this. And it gives a great sense of space and quietness. And then you've got, in the middle of so many of the scenes, you've got Andrew Scott's face and his dark eyes, which just seem to take in everything, just darting around and just communicating what he wants to communicate. Really, really good. I'm really looking forward to watching the rest of the series. But yeah, it just came to mind there because there's just such beautiful shots. The shots in Atrani and the shots in Naples, with beautiful light and just such clarity, and beautiful shots of the sea as well, and very kind of clean spaces, very clean, decluttered spaces. So I feel it lends itself well to today's theme. So there you go. Let's leave it there. Okay. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you want to throw me some love on social media, you can throw that love. You can throw that love with a review. You can throw that love with a comment, a like, a share, a subscribe. If you're really motivated and think, no, this is a decent effort, I get something from this show, you can even throw money at this, like I'm a very sexy cardigan dancer, and you're going to throw your dollar bills at me. You can do that using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/the ClearOut. And for the price of, I don't know, a pot plant, a small pot plant, once a month, you can throw me a few shillings. And for a shilling, I'd be willing to, and you can complete that sentence yourself. Okay, I'm done. Thank you very much for listening. The sun is back with a vengeance. It's beautiful. I will talk to you again next week. Take care. Travel safely. Get those obstacles out of your way. And yeah, of course, as always, mind yourselves. All the best. See you. Bye.